Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's session on metrics that matter, assessing the social impact of Canada's Social Finance Fund. I'm Ryan Clancy, your moderator for today. As the head of impact management at Rally Assets, I focus on practices that ensure our investments deliver measurable and meaningful benefits to our communities. And this work is deeply personal to me. My experience growing up below Canada's official poverty line and my experience as a youth with housing insecurity fuels my commitment to ensuring impact measurement drives positive social change in our communities. And so my hopes for today's panel is that we can explore how impact measurement can help us better understand the actual experience of underserved stakeholders, but also foster transparency on the social impact of Canada's Social Finance Fund. But before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking with you today from the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Chippewa, the Anishinaabe, Wendat peoples, and the Haudenosaunee, and I pay my respect to their elders past and present. I do also want to acknowledge that the topic that we're discussing today, impact measurement, is actually a practice that's associated with power and often reflects colonial histories. And we believe that we have a responsibility as a sector to respect and honor the diverse and culturally rooted practices of measurement that have existed among Indigenous peoples long before contact. But to get our conversation started today, I'd like to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. We got an exciting panel lined up today. And within that introduction, I'd ask that you please include an overview of your organization and its role within the Social Finance Fund. So with that being said, why don't we start with you first, Peter?
Great. Thank you very much, Ryan. And thank you everyone for being here today. My name is Peter Bent, and I'm a manager at Impact Frontiers. We're a nonprofit field building organization focused on impact management. We're collaborating with Realize Capital Partners and Common Approach to offer an impact measurement and management cohort program for social finance intermediaries through the Social Finance Fund. And later on in this panel, I'll have a chance to say a little bit more about the history of our organization and the work we're doing with RCP and Common Approach.
Great, thanks for that, Peter. Over to you, Laurencia.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Laurencia Perrin, très heureuse d'être sur ce panel aujourd'hui. Je suis arrivée au Québec en 2018. So I work at Common Approach to impact measurement, leading our work with the Social Finance Fund. Common Approach is developing flexible, community-driven standards. We focus on centering impact measurements on the needs of nonprofits, charities, and social purpose businesses and those they serve, while also addressing the needs of foundations, grant makers, and impact investors. Common Approach started in 2018 based on a recommendation from an impact measurement task force that included a diverse range of partners, and it aimed to develop an action plan for a common approach to impact measurement across Canada. And then when ESDC launched the Investment Readiness Program back in 2019, Common Approach was selected as the ecosystem builder for impact measurement, which led the groundwork for the role in the Social Finance Fund. So we are currently working with the three wholesalers to support the co-creation of the impact measurement approach of the Social Finance Fund. And we are supporting and we will support all fund recipients in implementing the Common Impact Data Standard. We're going to explain this a little later in the discussion, just to show how it makes it easier to measure, share, and aggregate impact.
Thanks a lot for the comprehensive overview of your organization, Laurencia. I'll now pass it over to you, Michaela.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. My name is Michaela Lawyer. I'm a Métis woman born and raised in Treaty 3 territory, and I'm a business integration manager at Common Approach. My main role at Common Approach and within the Social Finance Fund as well is to help organizations adopt Common Approach's standards through one-on-one guidance and support so that organizations have an easier time measuring their impact by leveraging digital tools that fit their organization's needs.
Thanks, Michaela. And last but far from not least, Julia.
Thanks, Ryan. It's great to be here with everyone. My name is Julia, and I lead an organization called Tenancy Shared Space in Guelph, Ontario. And we're a community hub with strong food network and local food sustainability threads in our work. And we're working on a project called Harvest Impact, which is a local social finance fund investing in food, farm, and environment enterprises with particular interest in circular economy. And I link in here as well with the Common Approach. So Tenancy has adopted the Common Approach as really a lot of guiding practices and principles, and as kind of a bit of the voice of an SPO, so social purpose organization, as well as an SFI, social finance intermediary. I'm happy to dive into the content.
Thanks for that, Julie. We look forward to hearing more about your experience, both as an SFI, SPO, and working with Common Approach. Lots of intersections there. But in kicking off today's session, I think it's important that we reflect on some of the important themes and trends that we've heard so far at this year's Social Finance Forum and yesterday's discussion, but also just the session before. There's a lot of discussion around impact. So I feel like we're flowing nicely through day two. One of the things I heard a lot yesterday and reiterated again today is a strong desire to going beyond the intentions on diversity, equity, inclusion, going to actually measuring and looking at what are those equity outcomes that are being achieved on the Social Finance Fund. In the last session, we also heard a clear desire for impact being at the forefront of decision making on the same level, if not greater, than financial returns. We've heard a lot about, of course, about the growth in the social finance marketplace in Canada, both in part to the introduction of Canada's Social Finance Fund, but also a surging or increasing interest from among investors wanting to understand more, to understand the impact of their investments. But despite all this growth and this excitement and these trends, there are a number of challenges that persist in this market. And one of those includes the topic of impact measurement. Yesterday morning, there was a lot of reference to the Quinn and Partners report, who authored a report in partnership with the Canadian Working Impact Investing Group that actually sheds light on a few of these challenges. For example, the report acknowledges a lack of consistency in how impact is measured, and that this lack of consistency can create a burden for social purpose organizations or social finance intermediaries that are trying to align their metrics with investor expectations. Alongside that challenge, the report calls for greater capacity building, education, and training opportunities to address these various challenges. At the same time, the Social Finance Fund offers a unique opportunity to tackle these challenges on a large scale. And so I'm thrilled, I'm excited to share with you that in partnership with the Government of Canada, BOAN, Cap Finance, Common Approach to Impact Measurement, and Realize Capital Partners are leading a nationwide impact measurement market building initiative to do just that. There are two key components of the strategy. One, the introduction of the Common Impact Data Standard that Julia just referenced and Laurencia and Michaela can speak to, that's being led by Common Approach. The second is an impact measurement capacity building initiative that's being led by Realize Capital Partners on behalf of the Social Finance Fund wholesalers. The mandate here is really to provide complementary education and workshops to investees of the fund. I'm also thrilled to announce that the first initiative under this program is going to be a 4-month peer-to-peer learning curriculum for social finance intermediaries that's kicking off this fall, that's being developed and led by our education partner who's on this call, Impact Frontiers. And we have more initiatives planned. So let's hand this over to the panelists. Let's dive deeper into what we can expect from these exciting developments. Let's start with you, Peter. What are some of the key practices that we're seeing taking hold globally? For example, can you explain what the 5 dimensions that impact is to the audience and how these can help organizations measure and manage their impact?
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Ryan. And it was really great to hear in the last session before this one, the five dimensions being referenced and used in that way. So hopefully this provides a little bit more context for people who are newer to this. So just to back up even further, I'd like to provide a little bit more context about how Impact Frontiers came to be and the work that we do. So Impact Frontiers originated at Root Capital, which supports agricultural enterprises in Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia. And it was then incubated within the Impact Management Project, which is widely known as the IMP. So I'll refer to it as the IMP going forward. From 2016 to 2018, the IMP was this convening of a practitioner community of over 3,000 enterprises and investors to build a global consensus on how we measure, improve, and disclose positive and negative impacts. When the IMP went down, as planned in the early 2020s, Impact Frontier inherited the norms of impact management that had been developed through the IMP, with all those different voices involved. And at Impact Frontiers, we continue to steward and deepen and also expand these norms. So we have two main programs. One is field building. We aggregate, synthesize, and share new practices that can help investors to increase their impact. On our website, we freely share resources such as white papers, handbooks, case studies, and tools for investors looking to advance their impact management practice. The second program, and this is how we come into working with RCP and the Social Finance Fund, it's the development and facilitation of group learning cohorts. So since 2021, we've had nearly 150 institutions involved with these. And currently some of our cohorts, independent of this effort with the Social Finance Fund, are co-led with Professor Kathy Clark from Duke University. And others have previously been led with different regional partners around the world. And in Canada, that was Rally Assets several years ago. So we work closely with partners to ensure that the content in these educational programs is relevant for local contexts. And also we want to make sure that it's informed by global practices of impact management. So, maybe you picked up a few minutes ago, Ryan said this is complimentary. I really want to highlight that we're really excited to be able to offer this cohort programming for free for SFIs through the Social Finance Fund as managed by RCP. So now getting to the core of your question, Ryan, a foundational part of the norms that we inherited from the IMP are the 5 dimensions of impact. So just, big picture background here. The idea behind these is that the impacts of enterprises on people on the planet can be understood across 5 dimensions. These are what, who, how much, contribution, and risk. So, short on time, of course, I'll just quickly talk through each of these in turn. The what dimension tells us what outcome a company is contributing to and how important that is to stakeholders. The who dimension, tells us which stakeholders are experiencing the outcome and how underserved they are in relation to the outcome. How much tells us how many stakeholders experience the outcome, what degree of change they experienced, and how long they experienced it for. Contribution tells us whether a company or investors' efforts resulted in outcomes that were likely better than what would have occurred otherwise. And finally, risk tells us the likelihood that impact will be different than expected. So, what can we do with this? Well, using the 5 dimensions of impact, it can help assess impact from multiple dimensions to help get the whole picture of what and how a company is creating impact. And I was trying to think of a way to present, just to give you a sense of how widely used these are. And helpfully, the organization Bluemark actually quantifies this through a survey, the annual survey that they do. And so I was looking at the 2023 survey from Bluemark, and I have some quotes and data from that report that I'll share with you quickly, just to give you a sense of how the 5 dimensions have contributed to an emerging global consensus on impact measurement and management. And the 2023 survey found that, quote, 26% of investors have due diligence processes that account for all 5 dimensions, which is considered the gold standard for a holistic evaluation of impact, and it reflects one of the fastest growing areas of practice within the field. So that report also mentions that was a 17% increase in the use of all 5 dimensions on particular investments from 2022 to 2023. And we can share a link with you to that report. It also has a great bar graph. It's really helpful to see how investors are engaging with each of the 5 dimensions. And the highest point of that bar graph was 90% for the what dimension. So 90% of the investors surveyed were at least accounting for the what dimension in their due diligence process. And again, about a quarter of investors were looking at all 5 dimensions. So just to wrap up quickly, Ryan, the 5 dimensions, they're a major part of the international toolkit for impact investors. And if you'd like to learn more, we have pretty detailed resources available on our website for free at impactfrontiers.org.
Yeah, thanks for that, Peter. I want to pick up an important point that you alluded to in your discussion, which was partnering and ensuring that the content remains relevant for the local context. And as the audience may be aware, the government of Canada is developing a social equity lens investment coding system to measure the progress against the social equity and gender equality targets of the Social Finance Fund. For those that are unaware, the coding system is expected to be revealed later this year. I'm hearing maybe late summer, early fall. Is what I heard last from ESDC and the government of Canada. In the last session, we also heard that a big focus in Canada ought to be on the who dimension. You mentioned the 5 dimensions, one of them being who. And as I understand it, Impact Frontiers is advancing an initiative right now called the Year of the Who. So can you explain what the Year of the Who is? Can this help social finance intermediaries improve their social equity practices?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. And it was really exciting to hear that in the last session. It's one of those examples of kind of convergence and people being on the same page, even if they're not directly talking to each other. So it's something that's in the air. So right now at Impact Frontiers, we're calling it the Year of the Who, and we're really focusing on the who dimension of impact and how that relates to our materials and our educational programming. So what that looks like is trying to integrate social equity across, again, the field building and educational materials that we have from before and also that we're developing for the future. And just some broader reflections based on surveying the field and some research we did in the initial stages of starting to put this material together is that we've observed and others have observed that investors are increasingly using strategies to advance social equity, but best practices for managing and disclosing the impact of those strategies, they haven't quite caught up. They're lagging, you might say. So impact management specifically for social equity, it is still at an early stage internationally. And one of the reasons we think that might be is because there's obviously a ton of expertise in the field of people who are specialized in assessing social equity issues, but it's still pretty siloed across disciplines. So one of the things we're trying to do from an impact measurement and management perspective is to work to help bring that together, to synthesize knowledge across the domains of racial equity, gender equity, and data equity, to integrate social equity across IMM practices. So one of the actions that we're taking is to work with outside experts to conduct a social equity audit of the norms of impact management. So these are the norms, including the 5 dimensions that I was just mentioning. Those, again, many of them exist in a form from 3, 4, 5, 6, or even more years ago. And so we're looking back over those materials with experts on gender equity, on racial equity, on data equity, and just making sure that the next iteration of those norms has social equity deeply integrated throughout them. And another strain of what we're doing this year is also exploring emerging impact management practices for investors who are currently allocating capital to achieve social equity outcomes. And based on the research so far, we're starting to develop guidance on implementing social equity considerations across impact management practices for investors. Bringing this back to the context of the Social Finance Fund, we're really excited to work to connect this work on social equity with the goals of the Social Finance Fund through working with SFIs in these cohorts with the Realized Capital Partners and Common Approach in order to help meet these progressive and laudable goals that the fund has for social equity and gender equality. So, happy to go into more details, but I want to share the stage, so I'll stop there. But really excited to be doing this work with everybody.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot for that, Peter. And maybe if there's others in the audience that can drop any links to the Year the Who initiative for others in the audience, that would be fantastic. Let's make sure that we talk about the Common Impact Data Standard. So, Michaela, I was hoping you could give us a bit of an overview of what is this Common Impact Data Standard that's been a big discussion at the forum. What's its role within the Social Finance Fund, and how can this help on the topics of impact measuring?
Yeah, so the Common Impact Data Standard is a way that impact data can be organized and processed by technology that makes it easy to exchange data from one organization to another. The data standard works in the background of our aligned software platforms so that you, social purpose organizations, SPOs, and social finance intermediaries, SFIs, the organizations that are measuring impact, don't have to become computer scientists to track relevant impact data curated to their impact goals. In the context of the Social Finance Fund, the Common Impact Data Standard will allow each organization to report its impact in a way that best suits its organization, rather than spending valuable time filling out forms and spreadsheets each reporting cycle. The Common Impact Data Standard is the structure all fund recipients will use to report their impact. So SPOs will report to their SFIs using the data standard, same with SFIs to wholesalers and wholesalers to ESDC. This will include really basic level impact data being shared, such as themes and outcomes, etc. At Common Approach, we've partnered with over 10 software providers to create easy-to-use solutions for social purpose organizations and portfolio managers aligned with the Common Impact Data Standard to help with this. And this list is continuing to grow as the Social Finance Fund grows. We have more software coming to us through SPOs and SFIs every week, which is really awesome. We highly recommend using software to manage, report, and track your impact data more easily. But we also understand that some may love using spreadsheets and find them more intuitive. So we've also developed resources for those looking to use spreadsheet options as well, such as Airtable and Excel. My role at Common Approach is to provide one-on-one support to SFIs and SPOs who have received funding to make the adoption process as painless as possible. Basically, I'm here to listen to your thoughts, your concerns, your problems, figure out a solution for you, with you. You can kind of think of me as a therapist without having to empty your pockets to see me. I will happily see you free of charge. And with that being said, the entire driving force behind what the data standard is to help SPOs by providing a way for them to save time, have less paperwork, and provides them more control over their impact measurement, which ultimately leads to overall better impact. I don't have time to explain what the data standard is or how it works fully, but I will share some infographics our team has designed to convey the message more thoroughly.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Michaela. And I really appreciate the therapy analogy and also taking the pain out of impact measurement. One of the things that when I'm having conversations, about the topic of impact measurement, I hear, especially among the investor community, on the desire for greater standardization in impact measurement to help with things like how do we compare impact, how can we aggregate it. And so, Laurentia, I'd like to ask you, how does the Common Approach manage these tensions between like standardized metrics that investors would like to pursue, but on the other hand, metrics that might be useful to social purpose organizations that are actually driving the impact on the ground level?
Yes, we hear that often too, and I think standardized metrics are very valuable, and there's really, really great work being done by international standard setters, but only when they're relevant to both the investor and the investee. It's also very crucial that investors can actually accommodate non-standard metrics, and there are a couple of reasons why, but I'm going to give you two today. First one, each organization has unique goals, missions, context. And when you use standardized metrics, you actually oversimplify and fail to capture the full range of impact. We find that standard metrics actually work best when impacts arising from reduced harm, if you look at the ABC category of impact frontiers, for example. So ESG metrics, waste reduction, energy consumption, it works well. But they work actually least well for impacts arising for novel solutions, so improving well-being for a group of stakeholders, for example. Second is that investors will actually get the highest quality data when investors share metrics they find that are most relevant. So when investors actually measure primarily for the purpose of reporting to the investor, the data quality is likely to be lower. And in practice, what we see is that investors, they mix and match from different standards. And when they can find a metric that resonates, they're going to invent their own. So with the Common Impact Data Standards that Michaela just explained, we can allow investors to do that. They can actually link their indicators to standards, create their own custom metrics, whatever is actually the most relevant to their own context. Once the investor actually receives the data from the investors, they can decide to leave it like this, to link it to other standards, for example, or match it to their own custom framework. And the question we often get from investors is, okay, but if all my investors measure very different things, how can I aggregate the data and how can I measure my own impact? So Common Approach has developed what we call the flexible framework, which is actually largely inspired by financial accounting principle. It allows investors to aggregate the impact metrics from every organization in the portfolio by grouping outcomes and indicators into common themes. Then the flexible framework can show total impact of the investor portfolio in tables and visualization, depending on what the investor wants to see. And how do we group those indicators together? We use two key principles. So the first one is construct-based equivalence and bounded flexibility. So construct-based equivalence actually groups conceptually similar items together. So if you think about apples, for example, you could group together Macintosh, Honeycrisp, Gala apples into the general apple category, even if they're different in size, in color, and in taste. This helps to communicate the common idea without getting bogged down into minor differences. Bounded flexibility sets the rules to limit what is considered equivalent, deciding that, for instance, if I continue my apple analogy, that a Bartlett pear is not in the apple category. So it finds a middle ground between the strict uniformity and total flexibility, ensuring that the data remains relevant and accurate, and that you are actually comparing apples to apples. Why are we doing this? I think historically, powerful groups have often shaped impact measurement and standards to their benefits. And we hope that flexible standards, as we propose, actually better accommodates diversity of perspective, diversity of needs, and diversity of context. We are still developing the flexible framework. We know it works because we've been able to build flexible framework with 8 different organizations already in our research and pilot projects. But we plan to continue to learn, and we are going to work with social finance intermediary in the early years of the social finance fund to gain experience, refine our approach, and our goal actually is to create principle-based guidelines for rolling up indicators so that everyone will be able to do this effectively by themselves later in the fund life cycle. So our key message here is we are here to help with Michaela to implement the Common Impact Data Standard and build flexible framework with you. And our goal is to empower both the investees and the investors to effectively capture and aggregate impact data and ensuring that measurements are meaningful and align with the diverse goals of different organizations.
Thanks for that, Laurencia. Sounds like some exciting big promises for the sector. Actually, I'd like to hear from Julia because Julia, your organization has the challenge of taking these concepts and this thoughtful approach that's been developed by a Common Approach to actually applying the concepts in a real life setting. So, have you been able to leverage the work of Common Approach, and if so, how's this impacted your approach to measuring impact?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of here to encourage any of the social purpose organizations right now to really own your role. I loved what Laurentia just said around organizations and individuals within organizations being able to like implement these practices themselves. So we can. There's obviously a ton of expertise in the impact measurement field. But at the organizational level, I think we do need to learn a lot more around practices, and really kind of encouraging organizations to um, kind of honor and hold their impact data as much as they do with their financial data. And really, even within my organization, over the last 16 years, I can see the lost potential of activity without having like a lot of solid impact measurement practices at the beginning. So in our work with Harvest Impact in particular, because if we're an SFI that's supporting organizations who are implementing a lot of action in the sustainable circular economy, we know we need to work with them to be able to embed impact measurement practices within their organizations. And that's really where Common Approach came in. When we first started talking to the Common Approach team, I think there was a comment around let's just imagine that impact measurement, it's like a spa day, and we're going to like help organizations embed practices and really bring their impact measurement to the fore. It took a long time. We're working with about a team of 16 different organizations, and I think it took a long time for the organizations themselves to trust that they could be the drivers of impact measurement within their enterprises. And I think that's like the actual imperative. If the organizations delivering the change aren't actually the ones also defining how they're going to measure impact, we're really at risk of wasting a lot of time and then also energy, and not really helping those organizations use their impact measurement to make really strong decisions about their organization, their impact, their communities. So we tried to embed that within Harvest Impact, as well as within our work at our work at 10C, and then the work with the teams working within Common Approach. And I wanted to touch on a couple of key things. I was on the previous panel, Narinder and Jaleesa and team commenting around the who of this. Like, I think a lot of organizations were thinking about the what, the things we're going to do, and then maybe the how and the how much, but the who takes like an equal kind of precedence, and or maybe even more. And one of the links we'll drop into the chat at some point is Harvest Impact published a capital demand survey that looked at, in just the first placement of funds that we rolled out, which is just like a couple $100,000. We looked at all of the intersectional identities of the entrepreneurs, and then how much money went to those different kind of aspects, as well as then the kind of what and the how much of their impacts. So that I'm mostly here to encourage organizations to dive in themselves, and I love that there's a more support for organizations through the kind of cohort-based learning and activities. And the Common Approach, I really want each and every organization in Canada to just dive in and look at the Common Approach. Michaela talked about the framework a little bit, but for us as an SPO working with lots of organizations, the common foundations are very common sense, and once you kind of work through them, there's just 5. I'm gonna list them because Michaela didn't have time in her thing. But you're describing your intended change, you're using indicators, you're collecting useful information that's useful to you, and you're gauging performance and impact. And then finally, you're communicating use and results. A big part of this work is obviously embedding in software and systems, and the field is changing every day. So that will become easier for us. And I think that's really vital because a lot of historically, I think social purpose organizations, we've been filling out word forms and sending them away to a funder, and then that document just lives somewhere, but it doesn't actually give us a comprehensive view over time in the same way that our financial system information does. And I think we need to shift away from that. So software, interrelational databases, so you can do different queries yourselves. And then really looking at quantitative, but also qualitative. And in our network that we're working within, there's a big drive to how do we measure caring? And there, I think, out of the stories from people that are supported by some of the community work that's happening, there will be ways that that some of the softer elements of caring, connection, as well as some of the like more tangible of how much food went to who and what areas of community I think that will help change our organizations. And if I had a last kind of like wish for the sector, it's for us to imagine a future when we as social purpose organizations can design, manage, maintain really meaningful, living, interactive data that can be built and analyzed over time. And then once we do this, we'll have vital information that can really strengthen the impact. And I love all of this as far as the dialogue today.
Thanks for that, Julia, and I certainly share that vision and that aspiration that you do. Just realizing and hearing you talk and apply these concepts that really we don't have enough time, but I'd love to have a fireside chat alone just on hearing how you've taken this and kind of built your own understanding on this topic. I do want to open it up to the audience. We don't have a lot of time, so I'd encourage people to load some questions into the comments, and as I understand it, those can flip it onto my side and I can see them come in. While those comments come in, I'll just do a bit of a recap while we wait for some questions to come in. One, we explored the topic of the impact measurement management approach to the social finance fund, consisting of kind of two cornerstone pieces. One, the common impact data standard, and some complementary education and training targeted for investees of the social finance fund. We heard a lot about Impact Frontiers and what they're seeing globally, but how they're thinking locally about how they can bring their education resources to the Canadian marketplace and their enhanced focus on social equity. We also heard a lot about like, what is the data standard? How does this thing work? And about how do we balance the tensions between what investors want, because we want more finance to come in there. We want greater impact, more capital to flow to those organizations, but we don't want to do that at the expense of trying to get organizations to, use data that's maybe not useful to them, that's more useful to investors. And then Julia so eloquently shared how she brought all these concepts into her organization has applied this. So, just waiting to see if questions pop into the chat. Not seeing any coming on my end. I can't actually see the audience. So I'm hoping it'll show up in the studio chat. But in the meantime, I will ask the question because I think it's one thing that we didn't get a chance to ask, and maybe I can ask Common Approach to share a little bit about the work that's been done on the disaggregated demographic data. I know there was an advisory group. There were some consultations done there. Laurencia, can you speak to some of the work that Common Approach has kind of been leading with the community on this topic?
Yes, sure. So one of the requirements of the Social Finance Fund is to collect disaggregated demographic data from board of directors and management team of SFIs and SPOs. So this is going to be collected, but there were some key questions because there's some constraints and complicated version because the Social Finance Fund is such a particular project with a lot of layers. People could see the data. The data could be identifiable because the number of these groups are very small. So we did some consultation. We actually wrote a report, 27 report of what we heard and what were the constraints and potential options. And then we had a demographic data expert group that was comprised of different experts, wholesalers, SFIs and SPOs to talk about this and to really come up with a recommendation for wholesalers on how to collect this data. So we've been very transparent on this work. We have a Google site where we put the agendas, we put the different notes of the different conversation that we had, and we hope that a report is going to be public very soon, and that we're going to have a clear implementation plan. So I think Kate is already on the thread of the chat, so she's probably already shared with you the link, but you can read this report and just check our newsletter. So if you want to just sign into our newsletter, you're going to have updates on our work and with this expert group and recommendation.
And thanks a lot for that, Laurencia. I'll just share one other thing, because I referenced really quickly actually about the topic of social equity and the importance of the who and those sorts of things. But just to provide a little bit more information, the Employment and Social Development in Canada is right now is continuing to work on the social equity lens investment coding system. And so for those that have not heard of this or not aware, this is a tool or a taxonomy to determine what will count as a social equity lens or gender lens investment. And so that's under development, should be publicly available late summer to early fall, but there's likely going to be some opportunities to learn more about it in the months in between. I did just see a rapid fire question to each panelist come in. If they had a magic wand, what would their organization, what would they do to improve impact within their organization? So just trying to see if there's any discussion about approaches or tensions to measuring change versus care. So let's start with the first. I think we'll only have time for the first one. So rapid fire question. What would you do with a magic wand as it relates to impact within your organization? Peter, over to you.
Oh my gosh. It's a good question. I mean, honestly, with a magic wand within our organization, I don't know if this is what the question asker is looking for, but I would just like to expand the reach of what we're doing. And there's just it's such a rapidly evolving field. There's so much to do all the time, keeping track of evolving best practices around the world and how to apply them to different local contexts. So maybe I was going to say get a cloning machine, but that sounds self-centered. I don't want more Peter Bents in the world. I want more people with different expertise to work with on this, and just expand the reach of what we're doing.
Thanks for that, Peter. I'll pass it to Julia.
Yeah, I love that question. I think we've been treating impact measurement like a visit to the dentist. And I actually think we need to be treating it like brushing our teeth. And it's embedded in organizations, individuals, and even community members that are like core to the work. So if I had a magic wand, it would be to have impact measurement be much more pervasive.
And Michaela, over to you.
Mine would be centered around data collection. So having it so that when impact is done, you don't have to fill out a survey about it. It'll just be automatically recorded. That would be my magic wand wish.
All right. And over to you, Laurencia.
Well, I think for us is we need to have widespread adoption. So I think magic wand is like how can we make sure that people are talking about impact measurement and are sharing best practices, and that people are actually adopting our standards, for example. But yeah, widespread adoption and collaboration and best practices in the ecosystem.
Well, I'll just share a magic wand wish of mine would be that impact data is not only helping like foster decisions, that it's truly visible on initiatives where we see it's really working, and we're learning from it, and we're learning how to better interact with stakeholders and what we can invest more in because we see greater impact. That would be my magic wand wish. With that being said, I see we're at time for today's session. I want to say a big thanks to all the panelists on the call, and thanks for the interest and the attendance of the audience as well.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everyone.